Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and all others who might be here. It's nice to greet you this morning. I became a member of this church in 1961. What's that, 64 years ago or something like that? And I first began attending here in 1955. 70 years ago. Most of you weren't, well, some of you were alive, I can tell that. But most of you were not. But I'm happy to be with you this morning and have this opportunity to share with you. About a year ago, or a little less, several months ago, I was asked to be a part of a 3-week series that was being done at the Moncton Wesleyan Church, Title Church, now by that name, and I was assigned a topic and asked if I would deal with it. And I agreed. And the 3 topics were politics. The sermon was given on politics. Don't let politics cause disunity in the church. You should love somebody who loves Jesus, whether they're a liberal, a Tory, an NDP, or something else. And so don't let division come in the church over political ideas. That was the first week. The second week was on cursing. How often do people who love Jesus say, "Oh my God," or "Good Lord"? And how often are things mentioned in our language that shouldn't be? And so we heard a message on politics. We heard a message on cursing, things not often discussed in church. And I was assigned the topic of tragedy. Topic not often spoken about in church. I felt powerfully drawn. So I've preached this sermon before, just so you know, not that that really matters a lot. Worship people have no trouble singing the songs a second time. So why should you worry about preaching a sermon a second time? John Wesley said one time, a sermon not worth to be repeated shouldn't be preached at all. And so I am repeating that sermon this morning, but we're going to talk about tragedy. Topic not often talked about in church. A disastrous event, a calamity, a catastrophe, a devastation, a cataclysm, a tribulation, a fatal, tragic, appalling, deadly, shocking event. Miles Monroe was a minister of the Bahamas who died in a private plane crash in 2014, but he once famously said, "The greatest tragedy in life is not death, it's a life without purpose." The anchor verse for this morning is there before you, I think, Ecclesiastes 9, verse 12. People can never predict when hard times might come, like a fish in a net or birds in a trap. People are caught by sudden tragedy. I've been preaching for about 60 years or so, and I do understand, ladies and gentlemen, public communication. I understand a soft opening to draw people in and put them at ease. I understand a talk laced with appropriate humor to make a point and keep the people's minds in gear. I do understand the use of a powerful one-liner that makes people think. They may even leave with a new idea. But this topic this morning for these few minutes is manifestly different from that in a way. It is not soft or humorous or the place of a carefully honed one-liner. We're going to talk about tragedy. As we prod this heart-impacting topic, just a note to you that my emotions may show a little as we stand in the darkening shadows of tragedy. Sooner or later, virtually every person who is in the sound of my voice this morning will come face to face with the brutal reality of a tragedy. It can take many forms, come in varying degrees of intensity. It could involve a sudden, unexpected death, or a crushing betrayal, or a crippling business collapse, or devastating health diagnosis, or abandonment by a spouse, or becoming a victim of criminal activity, or decisions you could not control, but they have deeply, destructively impacted your life. Reckless conduct by other persons for which you or your family pay some price. Suffocating family conflict, a stunning violence that touches your family, or it could just be, ladies and gentlemen, the circumstances of life that roll over you like a rogue wave and threatens to drown you. Tragedy. I was privileged to have an occupation in the church at one time where I traveled internationally as a part of my work, and that brought me face to face with tragedy that touched Christian believers. I stood to help to dedicate a cemetery in this town of Kanso in Sierra Leone in West Africa. This cemetery, which had been relocated and redecorated as it were, and new fencing had been put around, and it had been greatly upgraded with a gift that had come from the communist Chinese government, incidentally. And so I stood there, and that morning we observed and recollected and celebrated the lives of 9 missionaries in their prime, all from the Wesleyan Church. 9 missionaries in their prime, as well as children that had died from what was then called blackwater fever. We now know it to be malaria. While these people had committed their lives to take the gospel to those who never heard, and I stood there in the midst of what had to be considered tragic events and wondered, where was God? I ate with the family in the home of Monrovia, Liberia, and that very family was killed in that very house where I had had dinner with them in a civil war that ravaged that country. And I wondered, where was God? A young missionary was found dead in his apartment in Central Asia in the country of Azerbaijan. A gas leak in a stove released fatal gas into the apartment while he was asleep in the night, and it fell to me to meet and inform his parents of this tragedy and the crushing sadness that followed in its wake. I shared it with his dad. His mom couldn't bring herself to come to the meeting. She knew something was up. Finally, she did come over, and as I explained to her what had happened with her son, she stood with her back right against the wall, as far away from me as she could stay, and just slid right down the floor till her bottom hit the floor. These people were members of the Moncton Church, and I have permission to tell this story I just told of them, but I wondered then, where was God? Tragedy often seems to prompt the question, why? Why now? Why me? Why not somebody else? Questions really, ladies and gentlemen, don't really have any answer. There are no good answers to the why or why me or why now question. And these remarks are about the false idea, hear me now, about the false idea that things will always work out well for Christians. That's true in the eternal sense. At the end of the day, things will work out marvelously well beyond our wildest imagination. But while we are trapped here in this earth, inside this body, it's false to believe that everything works out well for Christians, not here, but always there. These remarks are about trust, and they're also about love. Matthew 5 said, "For he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the just and on the unjust alike." John Oxenham, the British poet, had these familiar verses that you are undoubtedly familiar with, many of you. "To everyone there opens the highway and the low, and the high soul climbs the highway, and the low soul gropes in the low, and in between on the misty flats, the rest drift to and fro. To every person there opens a highway and a low, and everyone decides which way their soul will go." August 29th, a year ago, last year, Johnny and Matthew Goodrow were run over by a drunk driver while they were bicycling the night before their sister's wedding. Johnny Goodrow played 11 years in the NHL, most of them for the Calgary Flames, and he was a current member of the Columbus Blue Jackets at the time of his death in August of last year. He left a wife and 2 children, a 2-year-old daughter and an infant son. On the opening day of the Blue Jacket season last fall, his wife, Meredith, spoke to the crowd and said this to them: "I don't want anyone to be mad. I want you all to be inspired by the life my husband lived. This means love your family first and foremost. Strength in the shadow of a totally unexpected, unwelcome, even unnecessary tragedy is the high road. Consider these things. Number one, developing the capacity to face tragedy requires strong winds and a solid root system. I should warn you, by the way, there are 9 points of this thing, but just relax. They're short. If a 3-point sermon lasts 30 minutes, that would make this an hour and a half, and the first person in the house to go to sleep be me. So don't just want to alarm you when I get down to point 3 or 4 and you're saying, my soul, will this ever end? Well, it won't be that long. Developing the capacity to face tragedy that requires strong winds and a solid root system. The University of Arizona has what they call Biosphere 2, is an Earth System science research facility located in the town of Oracle in Arizona. It was originally meant to demonstrate the viability of closed ecological systems, an artificial system with perfect growing conditions. There were many issues right from the beginning. One of these was with the trees, which initially grew faster than they ever would have grown in the wild, but they never would completely mature. And before they could mature, they collapsed. Later it was found that that was caused by a lack of wind in the biosphere. Trees were drooping and dying under ideal conditions because their strength and their root system was compromised. So scientists go to work to find out what's going on here, and it was determined that wind plays a major role in a tree's life. The presence of wind makes a tree stronger. It develops what the scientists call stress wood. And it makes it able to mature and not collapse under its own weight. Tragedy, ladies and gentlemen, will hit us sometimes with the force of a hurricane wind, potentially destructive. And this is not about avoiding the wind, but it is about building strength to resist the wind of tragedy. And where are we to find the strength to withstand this swirling wind, to build stress wood strength, as it were? The Bible says, anyone who listens to my teaching, this is Jesus speaking, anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and floodwaters rise and beat against that house, it will not collapse because it's built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. And when the rains and the floods come and the winds beat against the house, it will collapse with a mighty crush, Jesus said. Psalm 1 tells us that those who delight in the law of the Lord are like trees planted by the riverbed. Strong winds of tragedy that may come against our lives along the way help us to develop, ladies and gentlemen, internal strength necessary to face the external storms of life. Number 2, God never promised a safe journey, but he did promise a safe arrival. Wise is the preacher who knows when he's dry, right? Jesus said, here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, Christ said, because I've overcome the world. He also said, don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God and trust in me also. I'm going to prepare a place for you, and when everything is ready, I will come and get you so that you will always be with me where I am. The last chapter is a powerful one. The intermediate chapters can be somewhat difficult from time to time. Our good friend Barry Sullivan, known by many of you, wrote these words in one of his songs. I knew I could not walk another mile, strength all gone along with my smile. I cried, oh Lord, I can't make it through. Don't worry, son, I will carry you. In every storm of life, I will see you through. I will carry you till you're safely home. Ladies and gentlemen, it's always too soon to quit. Number 3, we never fully understand why God acts miraculously in some situations and seems silent in others. He's the potter, I'm the clay. Oh, how great are God's riches and wisdom, Romans tells us, and knowledge, how impossible it is for us to understand his decisions and his ways. The ways of God, the scripture says, are past finding out. Our finite minds can never fully grasp why life takes such unexpected and disastrous turns sometimes. My dad died when I was only 10, but I have a picture that was taken at a relative who had a cabin down in the state of Maine, down there by a lake, a picture taken one day of my dad, myself, my grandfather, and grandmother. And the way the sun was shining, I was standing in the shadow of my father. I was in the shadow of somebody bigger. The powerful sun couldn't beat on me there. My dad was a buffer between the sun that would have sunburned me perhaps or not. But I felt that strength of being in the shadow of somebody bigger. And those of us who love and face Jesus Christ, whenever we face a tragedy, ladies and gentlemen, we are in the shadow of somebody bigger. I understood that day that it was safe in the shadow of my father. And if you love and serve Christ, when tragedy hits you right in the side of the head, I need to tell you it's safe in the shadow of the Father. Number 4, God is not displeased when we ask the why questions. In fact, his own son pleaded with him, my God, why have you abandoned me? I went away full. This is from the book of Ruth in the Old Testament. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me home empty. Why has the Almighty brought such tragedy upon me? And the pain-filled uttering of why, even though it has no answer, can be part of the healing process, folks. If you find yourself in a tragedy, asking God why from a broken heart, and not from a heart full of rage and accusation and condemnation, but ask from a heart that is broken, asking why. While an answer may not come, the presence of God can somehow fill a vacuum. I can't explain why it happens, but it does. There was a Sunday school series one time. You remember that funny thing churches used to have called Sunday school? There was a series of lessons one time in Sunday school under the title, Why Don't You Do Something, God? And there have been times in my own life that I have looked up toward heaven and say, why don't you do something? It's okay to ask the why question, but keep your attitude good. Number 5, is that where we are? Facing tragedy is more about trusting God than it is about loving God. I was told early in my ministry life that to be trusted is a greater compliment than to be loved. I had to digest that for a while because we all want to be loved. I've heard people say, I don't care what other people think about me, and they're living in a high level of self-deceit. Everybody cares what somebody else thinks about them. We just kind of do. But to be trusted, that's another matter. When I was in leadership positions, I strove to be trusted. Love me if you can. My first wife, Gloria, and I were in ministry together for 50-some years. Everywhere we went, they all loved her. Everywhere we went, they didn't all love me. As a matter of fact, if you're timing the sermon, this isn't in the notes, but I can't avoid it. John Simons, whom you all would know or know that name, he's preached here and grew up here. When John and his wife, Willow Ann, were at seminary in Asbury, Kentucky, and their daughter Kate was with them, they were driving back at the end of his seminary time, and Kate was about 12 or 14, I think, or something like that. They were making a list of nice people. To get on the list, all 3 of them had to agree you should be on it. John and Willow Ann and Kate all had to agree. Gloria made it, I did not. So what can I say about that except what I already said? Trusting and loving, that's the thing we're talking about. And we all deeply love some people. Now, this may sound like a difficult statement at first, but hear me. Every person in this room, I think, loves someone fully, but they don't trust them fully. Trust them in small matters. I have relatives that I love, but I don't entirely trust the judgments they make with their money. I don't trust them that they will maintain a healthy lifestyle. I don't trust them that they will remember special days like anniversaries and birthdays. And I don't trust them that they'll bring home from the grocery store the stuff their wife said they should bring home from the grocery store. But loving them is another matter. So trust. See, Jesus put our emphasis on this whole trusting thing. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. You understand if you take that phrase apart? Trust in the Lord even though you can't figure him out. Don't lean on your own knowledge and your own wisdom and your own education. Extend trust to Christ, who has proven himself to be trustworthy. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. And ladies and gentlemen, when you trust God, there's no fear of betrayal. We've all trusted humans from time to time, and they may have betrayed us somewhere along the line, but God will never betray his own children. It's just not in his divine nature. It just won't happen. And there's no fear of being forgotten. Remember the shadow of somebody bigger. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. Ray Boltz wrote a powerful song a few years ago that says, the anchor holds, though the ship is battered. The anchor holds, though the sails are torn. I have fallen on my knees, and I have faced the raging seas. But the anchor holds in spite of the storm. Number 6, when tragedy comes, take time to grieve. Stephen Wilson is a country artist, and he had a powerful line in his song that said, grief is the only love that has no place to go. So when you're faced with a tragedy of whatever nature it is, take some time. To pretend that all is well when facing tragedy is often a misplaced attempt to project strength and control. But take some time. When something befalls you that is very unpleasant, don't rush by it, just take some time. Number 7, there can be peace in the midst of great sorrow. My first wife, Gloria, died with acquired hemophilia type A over 3 years ago. I was in the hospital room when she breathed her last breath about 4 o'clock in the morning. And I can't explain to you the mixture of sorrow and peace I felt in that moment. An old hymn came to me that said, I cannot tell thee whence it came, this peace within my breast, but this I know, there fills my soul a strange and tranquil rest. And the loss of a spouse can be very high on the devastation loss scale, even if older. My wife was 78. If it's your spouse, it's a tragedy. My wife was asked one time, you ever considered divorce? She said, no, I thought about murder several times. Consider this thought. The vast majority of you in this room this morning are married or hoping to be. 50% of you will face the loss of a spouse. You understand that? Every married couple here, 50% of you will face the loss of a spouse. Have you told your spouse you love them today, by the way? And if you haven't, why in the world haven't you? You all know Debbie, of course. She grew up here. She went to this church for 906 years. And so she grew up here. We've been married 2.5 years. Conrad, her husband, my dear friend, been dead for a decade. And we often have discussed together when we were considering getting married. She went through the pain of losing a husband through cancer, and I lost my wife through a blood disorder. Those are agonizing things, and part of the price we agreed to pay when we get married again is that one of us is going to face that again. It's not to make you feel like you don't want to get married. It's to make you feel, show your love to the person you're married to. But there can be peace in the midst of it. The morning when Gloria went to heaven, there was a peace there that I can't explain to you. Her heart had stopped, her body was dead, but she was hanging around somehow. Number 8, the end's in sight. Number 8, when tragedy comes, forgiveness may be in order. Tragedy touches you. You may need to forgive a family member who did something really outlandish, stupid, or criminal. You may have to forgive other people. You may have to forgive yourself, or perhaps even God. On October the 2nd, 2006, a gunman named Charlie Roberts entered the Lancaster County Amish one-room schoolhouse in Pennsylvania and shot 10 little girls. He killed 5 of them before killing himself. A tragedy hard to grasp and impossible to understand. Charlie knew these families and worked amongst them. He was not Amish, but he drove a tank truck to pick up milk from the farmers around that part of Pennsylvania, many of which were Amish, and he were there into their homes or into their barns every couple of days to gather the milk, and he knew these people. Family and friends gathered at the home of Chuck and Terry Roberts, Charlie's family, Charlie's parents. And Charlie himself, by the way, was married and had 3 small children. And the parents of the shooter and their friends, they were all gathered around trying somehow to grasp what in the wide world happened and why did this happen and how could this possibly have occurred, looking for answers that cannot be found. The sorrow and the shame and the distress and the disbelief and the anguish and the anger hung heavily in the air. Allow me to quote now from the book entitled Forgiven, written by Terry Roberts, that with Charlie, the shooter, Charlie's mother. Through the window, I caught sight of a stalwart figure dressed in black. It was our Amish neighbor, Henry Solfus, dressed in his formal visiting attire and his wide-brimmed straw hat. He was part of the Amish community, and he had friends and relatives whose daughters had died that day in that schoolhouse. Like every Amish person, Henry had every reason to hate us now. Henry didn't look angry, she said, as he walked into our home. Instead, compassion radiated from his face. He walked over to my husband, put one hand on his shoulder, and the first words he spoke took my breath away. He said, "Roberts," referring to my husband by his last name, "Roberts, we love you. This was not your doing. You must not blame yourself." By the time he left, it was for my husband not only the beginning of forgiveness, but also of healing. And so Charlie was not buried for about a week or 10 days after that to allow the Amish people to take care of the death of their children. When the day of Charlie's burial arrived, the state police had agreed that they would keep the press, who was very interested in this, and other people, lookers on, they would keep them back a distance from the cemetery, and they did that on a high bluff of ground where they could look down. And just as the time arrived for Charlie to be buried, from behind an adjoining building behind the church stepped out about 30 Amish people. The parents and grandparents of the children who had been killed by this man they're now going to bury, and they came and formed a shield around them to protect the family from the prying eyes of the press reporters. Where does that kind of strength come from? How do we have a relationship with Christ so deep and so strong that it goes beyond our natural inclination to hate people. Often the temptation, to withhold forgiveness and feed anger. I've met some people, the thing they ate most was their anger and hold a grudge. To do so, ladies and gentlemen, if you're holding grudges about some tragedy that came to you, you think somebody else's fault, to do so is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that, said Martin Luther King, Jr. Come to the light, the hymn poet said, 'tis shining for thee. Sweetly the light has dawned upon me. Once I was blind, but now I can see. The light of the world is Jesus. And number 9, when tragedy comes, God is watching you. God is watching you. December the 8th, 1955. My father was the pastor of the Corbett Avenue, what is now Wesleyan Church, Corbett Church in Barker's Point. I was taking a piano lesson. No, I'm not going to play the piano for you. I can play a couple of songs if nobody's listening. But I was taking piano lessons from a lady over in Westmoreland Street in Fredericton. My dad was supposed to come and pick me up after the lesson. He didn't show up. It was a Thursday afternoon, I remember. Anyway, one of our neighbors showed up and had the terrible task of telling me that my father had passed away. A couple of days later, my dad's funeral was held down at the Corbett Avenue Church. I was 10, my feet would barely touch the floor. And my mother and I moved in with my mother's oldest brother, my Uncle Chester Cochran, and his wife Christian, who lived over here at 63 Bridge Street. We moved in with them about 2 weeks before Christmas. A day or two before Christmas, there was a knock on my uncle's door, and he went to the door, and there was an old preacher there. He was about 50. When you're 10, he was about 50, and his name was F.A. Dunlop. Some of you old-timers would know him, and he always looked unhappy to me. It's not a criticism. He just carried a serious countenance, and I was intimidated by him totally. And my uncle said, "Harry, Mr. Dunlop is here to see you." I thought to myself, I can't remember all that I thought, but what I thought was, why would this old dude want to talk to me? What could that be about? And he came in carrying with him a bookcase about 1 meter wide, 2.5 shelves tall, with a little half shelf on the top, made of 3/4 inch plywood. It had been blonded, painted with white paint, and then kind of half wiped off. That was kind of the fashionable thing in the 50s. He brought that in and sat that down on the floor of Uncle Chester's house and said, "The other day, at your father's funeral," said, "I felt like God spoke to me, gave me an impression." He said, "Fraser," that was his first name, said, "Fraser, you need to go home and do something for that boy so he knows that I'm watching him." Mr. Dunlop said to me, "Since that day, between that day and now, I have built this bookcase with my own hands. And I'm presenting it to you now as a testimony that God was watching you at the worst moment of your life." And ladies and gentlemen, I still have that bookcase. It's in an office corner of our condo in Moncton, and I'm here to tell you, and this is not an empty statement, there's not enough money represented in this room to buy it. It's not for sale. And do I worship that bookcase? No, I do not. But every time I walk by it or sit next to it and look at it, I am reminded in my mind and in my heart that in the worst moment of our lives, God is watching. Ruthie. Sevilla Martin was a hymn writer who wrote many hymns. Her best known one, I think, is be not dismayed, whate'er betide. God will take care of you. She wrote it in Jordan Falls, Nova Scotia in 1904. Ruthie's going to sing 2 verses of this to us. Just going to remain seated. She's going to sing 2 verses of this to it, and I wish we would all take a moment to reflect on the great truth that in every situation of life and in every circumstance of life, God is watching. And He is the light that helps drive out the darkness of tragedy. Consider this truth. Offer private prayer if you need to. Of course, a public place of prayer is always open. Consider these words as she sings to us now.
Be not dismayed, whate'er betide, God will take care of you. Beneath His wings of love abide, God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you. God will take care of you. No matter what may be the test, God will take care of you. Lean, weary one upon His breast, God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you. God will take care of you.
In the first chapter of the book of Joshua, we read these words: Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Father dear, for these moments in your presence this day, we are thankful for your presence in this room. We are unworthy but grateful. And Father, I don't know many of these people in this crowd. I know nothing of the burdens they're facing. I know nothing of the tragedies they may currently be involved in or things that may come down the pike that they do not see at this time. I don't know anything about them, but you know everything about them. And I pray, Father, that you will be near this dear congregation. May they not be afraid or discouraged. For you are with us wherever we go. You promised that, and you always keep your word. So even when the winds are blowing and the storms are around us, and they're not there every day. There are some days when the sun is shining bright and it's a marvelous thing, but not all days are like that. So help us to be at our best for you, because you are always at our best for us. and help us to understand that you're not offended when we ask you why are these things happening, so long as our spirit is searching and not accusing. So thank you for who you are. Would you stand with me, please? Please hear these words of benediction, and then we'll be gone. And now unto him who's able to keep us from falling and to present us faultless before his presence with exceeding joy, to the only wise God our Savior, be glory and majesty, dominion and power, both now and evermore. And everybody who agrees said, amen. God bless you. You're dismissed.